Unaware that he had just rejected his own twin brother, Adrian Cole closed the door of his office and tried to ignore the strange feeling in his chest. The man who had stood before him minutes earlier had looked familiar. Too familiar. Not just similar. Almost identical. Adrian leaned back in his chair inside the towering glass building that housed Cole Industries, the company he had built from nothing. Outside his window, the city buzzed with life, but his mind kept drifting back to the man who had just left. The man had introduced himself as Evan Hale. He had come looking for work, and Adrian had turned him away. 28 years earlier, during a violent storm on the outskirts of a small-town hospital, 2 baby boys were born. Their mother, Lydia Hale, was young, poor, and completely alone. She had gone into labor prematurely, frightened and exhausted. The twins arrived hours apart, both small and fragile. The hospital struggled to keep them stable. Lydia held the first baby boy, tears streaming down her face. "You're my miracle," she whispered. But fate had other plans. A wealthy couple, Richard and Helena Cole, had been in the same hospital that night. Helena had just suffered the devastating loss of her own baby during childbirth. When Richard learned that a struggling young woman had given birth to twins and could barely afford care for even one child, a terrible idea took shape. Money could solve many problems. That night, arrangements were made quietly. A large envelope of cash changed hands. Papers were signed. One twin stayed with Lydia. The other left the hospital with the powerful Cole family. And the brothers never knew. Adrian Cole grew up in luxury, private schools, luxury vacations, elite universities. His father taught him discipline, ambition, and power. "You must always be the strongest in the room," Richard Cole often said. "The world respects strength, not weakness." Adrian learned quickly. By the time he was 25, he was already managing parts of the family business. By 28, he had expanded it into a technology empire. He was admired, feared, and incredibly successful. But despite everything, Adrian often felt something missing, an emptiness he couldn't explain. Across the city, Evan Hale lived a completely different life. He grew up in a small apartment with his mother Lydia, who worked 2 jobs to support him. Money was always tight, but love was never lacking. Lydia raised Evan with kindness and resilience. "You don't need riches to be a good man," she always told him. "You just need a good heart." Evan believed her. He worked hard in school, taxed at eventually earning a degree in mechanical engineering through scholarships and part-time jobs. He was brilliant with machines and design, but opportunity never seemed to come easily. Companies overlooked him. Promotions passed him by. Life felt like a constant uphill battle. Still, Evan never stopped trying. One evening, while researching companies that were hiring engineers, Evan stumbled across Cole Industries. The company specialized in developing new sustainable technology, exactly the field Evan loved. He spent days preparing his resume and portfolio. Finally, he applied. To his surprise, he was invited for an in-person interview. Evan wore his best suit, slightly worn but carefully pressed, and arrived at the gleaming headquarters. As he stepped into the lobby, people began staring. Some whispered, others looked confused. Evan didn't understand why, until he walked into the interview room and saw Adrian Cole sitting behind the desk. For a moment, both men froze. They looked at each other in complete silence. It was like staring into a mirror. Same dark hair, same sharp jawline, same intense gray eyes. Adrian frowned slightly. "Is this some kind of joke?" he asked. Evan blinked in confusion. "Excuse me?" Adrian studied the resume in front of him. "Evan Hale." "Yes." Adrian leaned back, still staring. "You look oddly familiar." Evan laughed awkwardly. "I get that sometimes, but the resemblance wasn't just familiar, it was unsettling." Still, Adrian forced himself to focus on the interview. Evan explained his engineering ideas with passion, showing sketches and prototypes he had designed. Adrian listened silently. The ideas were creative, impressive even, but something about the situation bothered him. The resemblance, the strange coincidence. It felt suspicious. Finally, Adrian closed the folder. "I'm sorry," he said coldly, "but we're looking for candidates with more corporate experience." Evan's face fell. "But my designs, they're interesting," Adrian interrupted, standing, "but not what we need right now." The interview was over. Evan gathered his papers slowly. For a brief moment, their eyes met again. Something strange flickered between them. Confusion, recognition, but neither understood why. "Thank you for your time," Evan said quietly. Then he left. The moment the door closed, Adrian exhaled sharply. Something about the encounter had shaken him. He pressed the intercom. "Rachel," he said to his assistant, "do a background check on Evan Hale. Is something wrong? I just want to know who he is." Meanwhile, Evan walked through the city streets feeling crushed. He had believed this opportunity might finally change his life. Instead, he felt humiliated. The strange part wasn't the rejection, it was the man himself. Adrian Cole looked exactly like him. It was impossible, yet undeniable. Evan pulled out his phone and called his mother. "Mom," he said when she answered, "can I ask you something strange?" "Of course." "Do I have any relatives that look like me?" There was a long pause. "Too long. Why do you ask?" Lydia finally said, "I met someone today," Evan explained slowly. "Someone who looks just like me." Silence. Then Lydia whispered, "That's impossible." But fear had already begun creeping into her voice. Back at Cole Industries, Adrian received the background report. He scanned the document. Name, Evan Hale. Age, 28. Mother, Lydia Hale. Father, unknown. Birthplace, Riverside Community Hospital. Adrian froze. He had been born in the same hospital. On the same date. His heart began racing. Coincidences didn't explain identical faces. Something deeper was going on. He grabbed his coat and left the building. Meanwhile, Lydia sat alone in her apartment, staring at an old wooden box she hadn't opened in years. Inside it were hospital records and one photograph. 2 newborn babies lying side by side. Her hands trembled. She had sworn never to tell Evan, but secrets had a way of finding the surface. That evening, Adrian arrived at the address listed in Evan's file. A small apartment building, nothing like the luxury he was used to. He knocked on the door. Evan opened it. Both men froze again. Seeing each other outside the office made the resemblance even more shocking. "What are you doing here?" Evan asked. "I need answers," Adrian said. Lydia appeared behind Evan. The moment she saw Adrian, the color drained from her face. She knew instantly. The 2 boys she had held as newborns were now standing in front of her, together. Her secret had finally come home. Tears filled her eyes. "You found each other," she whispered. Adrian frowned. "What do you mean?" Lydia stepped forward slowly. Her voice shook as she spoke. "You're brothers." Silence filled the room. "What?" Evan said. "Twins," Lydia continued, tears falling freely. "You were born together, but one of you was taken." Adrian's world tilted. "Taken?" She explained everything. The hospital, the rich couple, the desperate decision, the money, the guilt she had carried for 28 years. When she finished, the room was completely silent. Evan looked at Adrian. Adrian looked back. The truth was undeniable. The strange familiarity, the identical faces, the same birthday. Adrian ran a hand through his hair. "So, I rejected my own brother." Evan gave a small, stunned laugh. "Looks like it." For a moment, neither knew what to say. Then Adrian slowly smiled. "Well, I guess I should fix that." Evan raised an eyebrow. "Fix what?" Adrian extended his hand. "The job offer." Evan stared at him. "Are you serious?" Adrian nodded. "Actually, I think Cole Industries could use someone who thinks exactly like I do." Evan shook his hand, and for the first time in both their lives, something inside them finally felt complete. 2 lives that had been split apart had finally found their way back together. Not as strangers, but as brothers. And this time, nothing would separate them again.